Well, sometimes the things that impact you the most as a child are the things that you become most passionate about as an adult. For me, it's education, as I was doomed to fail from the start. You see, when my mother was pregnant, she suffered a series of complications, and she was told that there was only a 50% chance that I was going to live, and if I did, I'd most likely be brain damaged and unlikely to achieve anything in life. The best thing that she could do was to take me home and to love me. True to the doctor's predictions, I was slow to walk, slow to talk, and slow to learn. I struggled through primary school and high school to maintain a C average and scraped into the university with the lowest grades permissible. One of the salient memories of high school was sitting in the language labs for French class. In these labs, we would sit in isolated booths with headphones where you could record yourself speaking, trying to copy the recordings and play it back to hear yourself speak. The worst part of this was that the teacher could listen and give you feedback. I'd feel sick to my stomach waiting to be called out. French was one of the subjects I was never able to pass. And I don't know if you know what it feels like to feel stupid, but it's not a great way to spend the day. So given this amazing track record of high school, how do you think I went at university? Well, I actually ended up with a PhD in cognitive science, the scientific study of how the mind works. I ended up with a university medal for outstanding academic achievement, and I ended up with a GPA that put me at the top 1% of the student population. So from a struggling C average student at high school to the top 1% nearly overnight. Well, what was my secret? Well, my secret is I'm nobody special, and I hope to thoroughly convince you of that by the end of this talk. Instead, I stumbled across some fundamental truths about learning, techniques that, if applied to the school system, would have a profound impact on millions of lives. And it all comes down to basic neuroscience. You see, at the heart of it, we're all amazing learners. And fundamentally, we love to learn. It's how our brain is hardwired. So, surprisingly, if you look at the brain, the highest concentration of the brain's endorphin receptors, which are the pleasure chemicals of the brain, are found in the learning centers of the brain, such as the hippocampus. And interestingly, these centers are connected to the basal ganglia, responsible for addiction. That is, we're not just hardwired to find learning incredibly enjoyable, but we're hardwired to find learning incredibly addictive. As a species, we're pre-programmed to engage with and master our surroundings. And it's this love of learning that's allowed us to flourish. But if this is the case, that we're all innately programmed to love learning, why is it that a large proportion of students, such as myself, are not flourishing in the classroom? Again, we can draw on basic neuroscience to understand this answer. Endorphin receptors actually fire with an inverted U shape with respect to familiarity. That is, information that's too familiar is boring, information that's too unfamiliar is aversive, but information that's on the periphery of knowledge that extends your learning is highly pleasurable, and we actively seek it out. And that makes a lot of sense. Think about if you were an explorer mapping out unknown territory. If you simply stayed put in a familiar location, you wouldn't learn. And if you were totally lost and couldn't make sense of where you were, you also wouldn't learn because you couldn't integrate this into your map. The best way to build a map is to actively explore on the periphery of your knowledge. And that's exactly what we're hardwired to do, to actively explore on the periphery of our knowledge. When we're allowed to do this, learning is natural, it's joyful, it's addictive, and it's optimal. And it's what we choose to do in our everyday lives. When we watch TV, we don't play the same episode of our favorite sitcom every night again and again. And we don't channel surf randomly. We choose to watch series that have an ongoing narrative. a journey where events are interpretable and unfold over time. Or news programs about topics that we care about. And this is true for the books we read, the music we listen to, and the conversations we engage with other people in. The point is, in our spare time, we choose to learn. And interestingly, we're not the only species that does this. Even rats have a hippocampus for map building and are naturally curious to explore. So again, if in our spare time we choose to learn and it's so ingrained in our biology, why are so many kids disengaged in the classroom? Because it's not a natural learning environment. Think of a standard classroom. You might have 30 children in the class being taught the same information at the same time. And when you do this, because there's so much diversity among students, some students will be ahead and bored, and others will be behind, finding the situation quite adverse. Very few students are getting the right information at the right time for optimal learning and pleasure. In fact, one of the largest studies on student engagement in North America found that 63% of students are disengaged. That's 63% of students that are not flourishing. They're simply sitting in class waiting for the day to be over. These kids are struggling not because that there's something wrong with them. They're struggling because there's something wrong with the system. The system is wrong. There's a total mismatch between how we teach and how the brain naturally learns. Our children are not failing, we're failing our children. So thinking about my own learning journey, it actually makes a lot of sense. In primary and high school, I was just one of the 63% bored out of my mind. I was sitting there waiting for the day to end. But at home, it was a different matter. At home, I had the freedom to actually explore things, and I had quite a natural interest in computers. So at the age of 10, I started teaching myself how to code. I'd read every book there was and taught myself nearly every language that was available. And by the time I hit university, I was an expert. My wife prefers to use the term geek, but she's not here, so I'll pretend the correct terminology is expert. So what happened when I got to university? Why did I suddenly do well? Because I had the freedom of choice to choose the things that I was interested in, which was all the geeky things like cognitive neuroscience, philosophy, and I could choose those subjects. And as a result, I loved going to class and I did well. Unfortunately, many students are not given this opportunity, and as a result are stuck in a system that diminishes rather than inspires them. So Ken Robinson has said on various TED Talks that the education system doesn't need to be reformed, it needs to be transformed. We need less standardization and more personalization. But the real question is how? Given that teaching already ranks as one of the most top stressful occupations, how is it possible that a teacher could do even more work and personalize the learning journey for every student in the class? It seems like an impossible task until recently. So I believe the answer to the future lies in technology, and in particular my own area of research, which is artificial intelligence. AI can now be viewed as an intelligent tutor that will sit over your shoulder and give you personalized education. And what I'd like to do is give you some very practical examples of this. And I'd like to show a demonstration of some of my old software that I'm still working on. And I'd like to talk about 3 levels of AI that differ in complexity and how they are being used. So the first level is around rote learning. And this is the boring stuff we all have to do. So what is 5 times 7? What's the capital of France? What's the French word for happy? Name this bone. But it's applicable to a wide range of tasks. Even though this type of information seems boring, it is crucial. Daniel Kahneman calls this System 1 thinking, And it's the kind of information you want to simply come to mind when you face a problem. You don't want to have to struggle to find words when communicating with others, or number facts or equations when solving maths problems. You just want that information to be mentally accessible. It's fundamental to doing more complex tasks. So, as a student, how do we usually learn this information? Well, we usually give them an exam, and if they're a good student, they'll probably cram for it. But if you cram for an exam, there's actually an exponential forgetting curve. So most of what you've actually learned is forgotten in the next few days or weeks. And as a result, the kids haven't actually learned all that much. The best way to rote learn information is what's called spaced repetition. So you actually refresh the information just when it's about to be forgotten. And every time you do this, that forgetting curve gets less steep and you actually remember more over time. Interestingly, some studies have shown that with exactly the same amount of study time, you can double your performance just by switching to spaced repetition. The other question is how to study. So, what to do if you're rote learning? A lot of students just grab their textbook and highlight and read and reread until they feel that they know it. But unfortunately, according to science, this is a really horrible way to learn. The best way to rote learn information is through what's called active recall. That's when you actually actively test yourself, like using flashcards. What is the capital of France? And when you do this, you remember a lot more. It's around that cognitive struggle that learning actually occurs. So given a classroom of 30 students, to actually optimize rote learning, what I need to do is know exactly what every single student in that class knows or doesn't know, and present exactly the right material at exactly the right time for optimized performance. And this is nearly impossible for a teacher, but actually quite trivial using technology. So this is an earlier version of my software that is just an example of this. It allows teachers to readily create their own material and share it with the class and other teachers. And in this case, it's around geography quizzes. And from a student's perspective, all they need to do is log on and they'll be shown straight away their level of retention on each topic. And then they can select the topic they wish to work on, and taking into account calculated forgetting curves for each student for each item, these systems present exactly what the student needs to practice for optimal learning. Flashcards can do anything such as quizzes, around geography. We can use it for character recognition, learning handwriting, like drawing the Japanese symbol for 5, and even audio recognition, learning mathematical equations. All the student has to do is log into the system, choose a topic, and the system takes care of the rest. The system actually generates the forgetting curve for every piece of information, presenting exactly what the student needs to know at exactly that point in time for optimal learning and retention. And of course, being a computer system, you can gamify it to whatever way you want to make it more fun for kids. So there's a lot of systems that are out there that do this. So this is sort of a starting point for the basics if you're a teacher. So that's rote learning, and that's a great start. But what we want to do is do a bit better than that. So a good place to start as a teacher is using flashcards, but these concepts in isolation aren't particularly engaging. And it's where concepts are used together, such as words in a sentence or in a live conversation or notes in a piece of music, that things get far more practical and engaging. And this is where level 2, generative AI, comes in. So generative AI, like ChatGPT, can actually create its own questions for the child to answer, but also gives the students specific feedback. So for example, in teaching music, what generative AI can do is not only listen to the student and provide feedback, but can actually generate its own music matched to the skill level of the student. So it knows what the student can and can't do and actually generates the right music for that student. So just an example of this is my son, Nicholas. From an early age, Nicholas wanted to play the saxophone. But when he was old enough to join the school band, there were too many saxophone players. So he was instead given a trumpet that he had absolutely no interest in playing. He was one of the 63% of disengaged students. I told him to stick it out for a while to see how he goes. Within a month, we received this email from his teacher. And it said, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Bolland, I'm writing to you regarding your son Nicholas and his lack of effort with his trumpet studies. His performance and progress is very poor indeed, and if he's not going to try, then we'll have to consider him exiting the program." So Nicholas was evidently at a low level of familiarity, pleasure, and motivation. And unfortunately, I know nothing about playing the trumpet, so I couldn't help him. However, I could write software that could. And here, this is where he was before, and this is me demoing the system. So this again is just an example of generative AI. This can listen to me playing the trumpet and provide feedback. And we're just starting with a single note at a time, just working on breath work. And this helps you improve really quickly. So with that biofeedback, you see that I'm hitting the correct note. And then it starts introducing more and more concepts matched to my level of ability. So here it's introducing a D, which are different valves to play. And again, I'm just starting to get the pitch right. And you'll see over time, it gains in complexity of what it's actually teaching. But again, it's composing its own music for me to play based on my level of ability. So from that just simple example, what happened with Nicholas is over time, over a couple of weeks, Nicholas had moved to excellent progress. And 2 years on, he hadn't been kicked out of the school band and he actually loved performing in concerts. So, and to me, this is the power of AI. It's able to move struggling students and disengaged children into their maximal learning zones. And again, students can see straight away their level of performance and can select topics that they wish to work on. Here's another example around language. So this is another system I actually wrote for my daughter who was learning French of all languages. Of course, that was again something I was not skilled at, but this could actually generate French in real-time conversations, listen to the student and adapt. And you'll see that this is actually what a few systems are using these days. So it's conversations generated on the fly, and systems such as Duolingo and Khan Academy are now integrating GPT-4 to allow for this personalized approach to what they teach. So generative AI can be used for a range of uses in helping teachers create their own material, can provide feedback to students in writing essays. There's a current explosion of tools that's available to teachers. So what's next? Well, the next level is level 3, which is really what's coming up in the future. And this is integrative AI, where we actually match generative AI, which is the ability to create its own questions and give feedback, with various technologies. So for example, in teaching a child foreign language, we can use virtual reality and embed the child in particular contexts and really interesting scenarios that teach the subject in the shortest amount of time. And we can link this to other existing technologies such as gesture recognition. So for example, the Xbox at the moment has this wonderful system where it can actually detect movement and your gestures, and we can link this to generative AI so it can teach things such as dance, martial arts, and even sign language. So the point is that we can use AI for generating exactly what the student needs to learn at that point in time for optimal learning. And we're starting to see this in things like augmented reality, where students can interact with learning in a 3D environment. So this is just an example of the sort of software that's on the market at the moment.
The HoloLens is absolutely the most amazing piece of technology. Within 5 seconds, I realized that the world had changed. It was an immediate realization that this is something exciting and we have to be a part of this. Seeing things in 3D is something that you could do before with some glasses. The thing that the HoloLens gives you is the ability to walk around those 3D objects and to really experience them as if they're in the room with you.
It is augmented reality, it is mixed reality. And what that means is I still see you, I still see this room and everything around me, but the digital content is inserted into the room as if it's actually there.
As a teacher, I can see what they're all looking at. And that's something that we think has real power.
So again, that's just a demo of augmented reality. And what's coming next, of course, is those are the things we can do with today's technology. But even more interesting is that our technology is changing, and it's changing exponentially. And with exponential change, change isn't gradual, but it feeds on itself, and the rate of change gets faster and faster. And Sora is an example of what we'll see in the future. So Sora, again, is through OpenAI that invented ChatGPT, but this is content that it generated just from a text message. So you can imagine how this is going to be used in education in terms of creating these real world interactive environments that are tailor-made to each student. It's pretty amazing what we're going to see in the next few years. So the point is that although initial change might be slow and unimpressive, exponential change comes quickly a disruptive force. And over the last few years, we're starting to see this disruption in AI. And the aim of my software and AI in general, I believe, should not be to replace the teacher. It's just a tool that you can use to whatever degree benefits you. The aim of teaching is to be a good teacher, to use whatever technique works for you. And to be a good teacher, it's about preparing students to flourish in the real world. And with technological disruption, we not only need to consider how we teach, but what we teach. What are the skills actually required to flourish in life? To navigate a future where we don't even know what jobs will exist in 5 years, let alone 20. And I'd like to quickly mention 2 such skills that are fundamental. The first is emotional intelligence, the ability to navigate social situations. And we know from the science that the most important predictor of success is warmth of relationships. That's it. People who are good with people live longer, they have better health, happiness, and wealth. We live in a world full of people with differences in opinions, needs, hopes, and dreams. Very little we achieve in this world we achieve on our own. We need to be able to navigate this social world. Working on social skills is one of the best investments that you can make. And the second major skill is how to deal with real-world complexity. How do we navigate challenges in which we don't know enough to think our way forward? Life isn't like a science class where there is a correct solution that can be found in the back of the book. I can't put you in a room full of people and get you to analyze them and pick a best friend for life. There's no rule book for telling you exactly how to deal with bullies. 9 out of 10 startups fail because people can't accurately predict what will work in practice. And I can't tell you exactly what the future of education looks like. You can't think your way forward to the perfect marriage or the perfect career choice. It's an ongoing exploration where you learn what works by doing, reflecting, and adapting. And combining these skills, these two skills I just mentioned, I think this is what we need to do in school. That is, AI can be used to teach the fundamentals of maths or science or music, and class time can be used to explore what are the cool things you can do if you knew maths or science or music. Group-based activities aligned to the interests of the students, but required design thinking approaches to solve, to prototype ideas, test what works through experimentation. We need to start thinking not just how we should teach, but be thinking of what the skills our kids actually need to truly flourish in these disruptive times. So, in summary, I think AI is here, and of course we can use it now, and it's expanding and improving at an exponential rate. There's a tsunami of change about to hit our shore, which I believe will totally transform the way we approach education. And if we do this right, we'll enable every child to unlock their hidden potential and to live a full, rich, and valued life. But what is a full, rich, and valued life? For me, maybe it can be found in the following quote by George Bernard Shaw. He says, "This is the true joy in life. Being used for a purpose recognized by yourself as a mighty one. I am of the opinion that my life belongs to the whole community, and as long as I live, it's my privilege to do for it what I can. I want to be thoroughly used up when I die, for the harder I work, the more I live. I rejoice in life for its own sake. Life is no brief candle to me. It's a sort of splendid torch which I've got hold of for the moment, and I want to make it burn as brightly as possible before handing it on to the future generations." So perhaps the ultimate aim of teaching is to help students burn brightly and find their place in the world. What every child needs is someone to delight in them, someone to help them find their natural joy and curiosity, someone to help them explore at their own pace topics that fascinate them, someone to help kindle that flame. So be that somebody. Thank you.